Well, my name is Dr. Valerie Ann Johnson, and I chair the African American Heritage Commission with pleasure and with joy. And I'm going to take us in a little different direction from what we heard just a minute ago and talk about someone, read from the words of Pauli Murray, who is one of our own. And given the tenor of the times, as Jaki Shelton Green started us off with, this just was a piece that I thought would be important, and it's called Members of Your Race Are Not Admitted, and it's in her autobiography called Song in a Weary Throat, and this is from chapter 11. My application pending before the University of North Carolina was suddenly transformed into a public controversy by the surprising and far-reaching decision of the United States Supreme Court in Missouri ex rel. Gaines v. Canada. The case had moved slowly through the courts for 3 years without attracting public notice. And I was wholly unaware of it, but it could not have been more timely for my purpose. Lloyd Gaines, a 25-year-old Negro of St. Louis, had been rejected by the University of Missouri School of Law in 1935, solely on the ground of race. A state statute provided for segregation in public and state-owned schools, but there was no law school at Lincoln University, the state's Negro institution. With the help of the NAACP, Gaines brought suit charging denial of equal protection guaranteed by the 14th Amendment. His case was directed by Charles Hamilton Houston, a brilliant graduate of Harvard Law School and former dean of Howard Law School, who acted as special counsel for the NAACP. On December 12, 1938, the Supreme Court ruled in a historic 6-2 decision that the state of Missouri must provide Lloyd Gaines with facilities for legal education substantially equal to those which the state provided for white students, or it must admit him to the University of Missouri School of Law. The court declared that Gaines' right was a personal one and did not depend on whether other Negroes had sought the same opportunities. It also said, quote, "The question here is not the duty of the state to supply legal training or of the quality of the training which it does supply, but of its duty when it provides such training to furnish it to the residents of the state upon the basis of an equality of right," end quote. The court held further that the state could not discharge its constitutional obligation to Gaines by providing tuition fees for him to attend law school in another state, as it had been the custom in several southern states when faced with the demand by Negro students for graduate or professional education. The Gaines decision sent shockwaves through the South, affecting 16 states, including North Carolina, which barred Negroes from attending its state universities. The ruling was the first major breach in the solid wall of segregated education since the Supreme Court announced the, quote, separate but equal, end quote, doctrine in the Plessy case of 1896. It would take many hard-won court battles to reach the Brown decision of 1954, but for Negroes, Gaines was the beginning of the end of compulsory school segregation. I could hardly contain my joy. Miraculously, it seemed to me, the court has spoken on a matter in which I had an immediate personal stake. I did not have to wait long for a reaction. 2 days after the Gaines decision was announced, the University of North Carolina rejected my application solely on racial grounds. On December 14, 1938, the dean of the graduate school wrote me the following letter. Dear Miss Murray, I write to state that I am not authorized to grant you admission to our graduate school. Under the laws of North Carolina and under the resolutions of the Board of Trustees of the University of North Carolina, members of your race are not admitted to the university. It has long been the social policy of the state to maintain separate schools for the whites and Negroes. It is expected that the legislature of the state will make provision for graduate instruction for Negroes. At the present time, the precise form which this provision will take has not been announced, although a commission appointed by the governor of the state has submitted a report. Most of us expect the positive action will be taken in the next session of the General Assembly. Very cordially yours, W.W. Pearson, Dean. The rejection was not unexpected, but seeing the reason in black and white was infuriating. I wrote immediately to Dr. Frank P. Graham, then president of the university, calling attention to the Supreme Court's ruling in the Gaines case and to President Roosevelt's recent address committing the school's liberal tradition. So there's more to this as she goes back and forth with the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And as you know her story, there's a certain irony in that the ancestors who owned her ancestors were also persons, the Smiths of Chapel Hill, who helped found the University of North Carolina. So she talks further on what happened when she took the matter up. And I want to read to you right now some of the responses she got. I had barely mailed the material to the NAACP when on January 5th, 1939, the story of my application broke in Chapel Hill and was quickly picked up by the local press and radio and by the national news services. Here's one of the responses. How quickly President Roosevelt's words had come home to roost was revealed by student reporter Lafitte Howard's lead paragraph. An application for admission to the university, now lying on Dr. Frank Graham's desk, may turn out to be an 8-ball large enough to hide all Carolina liberalism and the progressive philosophy of the university president, should a Negro woman now living in New York City be determined to push her demands to enter the graduate school. Campus opinion, according to Howard, seemed to be that this was probably part of a similar movement forming in all southern states as a result of this recent Supreme Court decision granting Lloyd Gaines, Missouri Negro, the right to attend University of Missouri Law School if equal facilities were not provided for colored students in the state. This opinion assumed, of course, that the timing of my application was a result of the Gaines case rather than a coincidence. Then followed an account of student threats, chilling in their implications. Campus opinion took on an antebellum note yesterday as one man declared, quote, "I think the state would close the university before they'd let a Negro in. I've never committed murder yet, but if a black boy tried to come into my home saying he was a university student, ... Students hearing of the movement vowed that they would tar and feather any N-word that tried to come into class with them. And she goes on to say, it was well for my peace of mind that I did not see the story until a week or so later when I began reading copies of the student newspaper. And there was a lot going back and forth. I want to move to the part where she was unsuccessful in the sense that she was not admitted at that time in 1939, admission into the law school. And this is what she says. At the time, however, what I felt was the galling disappointment of personal defeat. And it was only later that I made a surprising discovery. Much of my life in the South had been overshadowed by a lurking fear. Terrified of the consequences of overt protest against racial segregation, I had sullenly endured its indignities when I could not avoid them. Yet every submission was accompanied by a nagging shame which no amount of personal achievement in other areas could overcome. When I finally confronted my fear and took a concrete step to battle for social justice, the accumulated shame began to dissolve in a new sense of self-respect. For me, the real victory of that encounter with the Jim Crow system of the South was the liberation of my mind from years of enslavement.